So it's my honor and pleasure to introduce Dr. Gary Downey, our keynote speaker. You have his bio in the program, so I won't go through his many honors and accomplishments. I think he is known to many of you. His reputation precedes him. And I think a lot of you are probably familiar with portions of his work that are most directly related to engineering education. That's not a surprise. And I think probably his most well-known intervention that has a lot to do with the idea of professional formation, just cut out for a second, is the engineering cultures curriculum that has been implemented on numerous campuses as well as online. And among other things, what that curriculum does that I think is especially clever is that it asks students to map the differences in what counts as engineering knowledge in different countries and at different times in history. And in doing this, what it does is it challenges students to reflect on their own location and their own knowledge and epistemology and their own aspirations as engineers. And so they learn not only how to work effectively with people who define problems differently from the way that they do, but they actually are learning how to rethink what engineers are and do, and they develop a new kind of engineering identity that refuses to sacrifice other aspects of the self in the name of objective problem solving. And so with that little teaser of an introduction, please welcome Gary Downey.
Un momento, por favor. Sean, are we good with the sound? We're good?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Riley, and welcome to Virginia Tech. Someday. We hope to see you there. And I'm honored to be presenting to this meeting and to be following a distinguished panel. Dr. Maldonado, congratulations. Dr. Wong, I don't know if Dr. Frini Mundi, Dr. Karsten may not be here, but thank you. And is Sue here? Is Sue Chemnitzer here? I mean, I want to pay homage to Sue Chemnitzer myself. I have my own Sue Chemnitzer story. Well, I was delighted to learn that the Engineering Directorate is establishing and has initiated a multi-year, I love this, multi-year initiative on the professional formation of engineers. While it is the case that I am not currently funded by EEC, by the way, I am currently funded by EHR. And while I'm required to say that nothing that I have to say here today represents the views of the National Science Foundation or EHR, well, I kind of hope it does. Okay, so, this is what I'm here for, and I want to support this thing. I support strongly the new initiative in the professional formation of engineers. With a small qualifier about taking care to distinguish analytical categories from actors' categories. So I'll be wrestling with this word professional at the end. Now I want to say that I don't consider myself to have solid epistemic grounds, authority, or probably better, translational authority regarding the concept of formation and its implementation and formulating and scaling up new practices in the making of engineers. I judge my own achievements in scaling up new practices, or making them travel, as I like to think about it, to be quite modest, actually. And while I playfully tell my own students that in my engineering cultures course, they're learning with me the other half of engineering practices, namely those that dominant practices in, or let's say dominant pedagogies in the engineering sciences ignore. In fact, I still live and work on the periphery of their curricula in the world of the humanities elective. I'll tell you a little bit more about my own background, my own training. I'm happy to say, by the way, that that's not true for quite a number of my former students, some of whom are in this room. Now, as I'll try and illustrate below, my trajectory of critical participation, that's how I think about it, critical participation in the making of engineers, has far more curricular steps ahead of me than behind me. But if this multi-year NSF initiative is going to work, we must all find ways of claiming its epistemic and translational authority, using it to formulate and scale up new practices in the complex ecologies involved in the making of engineers. And you people, you are here. I mean, you are NSF's main clientele of researchers in engineering education. So how you view this initiative and how you integrate it into your own work, how you think about it, matters greatly to those who have decision-making authority about solicitations and program definitions. So they're going to be listening to you closely. Now, in my view, treating engineering education as complex adaptive systems, which is kind of where we are now, took an important step for NSF. Because it made visible new actors, actors that may not have shown up in models of teaching and learning, which has tended to be the dominant approach, which has dominated research in education, fields of education. Treating engineering education as professional formation hopefully takes another. The first solicitation is out. I didn't know that when Dr. Riley first contacted me. It calls itself a pilot program. So that means that more is to come. How are you going to shape it? So this meeting here, including this address, this address, it's about you. I'm here to offer one possible case for analyzing engineering education as processes of formation. Now, in my own research and curricular efforts, I have found the concept of formation to do three things. And this is kind of a weird room because I'm encouraging you to not look at me. You look over there, so I'm in this space in the middle. I'm just a voice here. One involves highlighting questions of knowledge and personhood. I'll be talking more about that. Knowledge and personhood. Second, by showing our audiences to not be wholly rational actors. It has enabled me to think of resistance as actually commitment. And third, in seeking to nominate alternatives, it has focused my attention on what I call frictions in dominant pedagogical practices. So I'm arguing here that embracing the concept of formation can enhance how we who do research on engineering education understand, how we report to and attempt to influence our audiences, especially those in the engineering sciences. And also, I want to say that using the term professional with formation is okay for NSF. We need to do that. Now, to address this first point, I want to introduce you to Ruth. Ruth was a student in a summer school that Juan Lucena from Colorado School of Mines and I taught some years ago in Paris to 37 women engineering students from 17 countries. And Ruth generously agreed to share with us her experiences. You will see Juan and the school director flitting around a bit in the background here. Ruth's father was a civil engineer. Her mom started encouraging her to consider engineering when she was 14. Now, what I'm trying to do here with a set of short clips is I'm trying to make an anthropological move. I was trained as an anthropologist. I'm trying to make the familiar just a little bit strange.
Let's do it. My mum, she works in industry, and she was encouraging me to go into the field of engineering because I was good at maths, I was good at science. But what she wanted to do was she wanted to make sure that I wanted to go into engineering. So what she did is she put me on lots of work experience placements. I don't know if you guys ever have them. Sort of, 2 or 3 days working at I worked at a landscape architect, an electrical engineering company, construction engineering company, design engineering company, mechanical engineering company. I did them all. I did about 6 or 7 placements, and from that was how I decided that I wanted to do mechanical engineering. So that was my main path into that.
high school, she was encouraged to apply to Cambridge and Oxford.
I go to a place called Manchester University, which is, in my eyes, there's lots of universities which specialise in science and engineering. Like the university that everyone wanted me to go to, except Oxford and Cambridge, was UMIS, which is University of Manchester Institute of Science and Technology. But I really didn't want to go there because I'd be interacting with engineers and scientists day in and day out. It didn't have people from the arts. I really wanted to get a mixture of people, and I didn't want to be just living with engineers, which is quite strange. And also they didn't have very good sports teams because everyone's doing science and engineering, and not many people do science and engineering, in my opinion, do sports.
Like many engineering students in the UK, Ruth took a gap year between secondary school and university, and my apologies for the static that's on part of this one.
It's quite complicated. The reason I chose to do a course that didn't have a sandwich course in it was because I'd already done a pre-university year with the Year in Industry programme, or scheme, as we call it. I'll just tell you a little bit about that. This is something my mum got me into again. She said, listen, if you're going to do engineering, you really need to get some proper experience. Work shadowing isn't enough. You need to know that this is what you want to do. 4 years specialised at university is a long time to come out and decide that you don't want to be an engineer, you want to be, So I was like, okay. So we found out Year in Industry scheme, which is run all across Britain. And what you do is you apply to them, they send your CV, resume. It's alright. You've got a CV. You send your resume, they send your resume off to lots of different companies across England, Britain. The companies, if they're interested in you, call you in for an interview. And I got 2 interviews. I got one at Zeneca, which I don't know whether you know AstraZeneca, but most of your pharmaceuticals in the US are made by AstraZeneca. And one with Shell. Do you know Shell, the oil company?
Ruth started mechanical engineering classes in her first year, check this out, and she had an encounter with a male lecturer.
I remember in my first year I did 20 subjects, so I did 10 exams in the first semester and 10 exams in the second semester. It's an awful lot, and we have a 40% dropout rate at our university for engineering and mechanical engineering. It's quite harsh, 40, yeah. So the courses I was doing, I can't remember, fluids, thermodynamics, maths, quite a lot of maths, specialised in mechanical engineering in the first year. We did some management things, we did some things on the environment, electrical engineering, signal processing. I did computer-aided design. We did probably about 8 hours a week on that, and we designed all sorts of things like bearings and sort of machine tools and everything I wasn't interested in really. An interesting point I'd just like to make about women engineers is one day I went up to my lecturer and I was working on the computer and I was like, I'm so rubbish at this computer-aided design, I can't do it, I'm so rubbish. And he said, oh, well, girls generally tend to be worse at spatial awareness than men. That's why women can't park. Right, this is my first year. I'm like, one of the only women in engineering. And a guy comes up to me, and a lecturer comes up to me and says that. And I was like, great.
Think about it. She once sat beside a French... Two more left. She once sat beside a French exchange student.
Well, just one day we were given an example to do, and I think it was on, I don't know if anyone knows linear optimization, and it was about, you can either use the graphical method or the linear simultaneous equation method. I don't know. Anyway, the management, it was actually a management subject, and the lecturer said to us, right, I want you to do this assignment, it's tutorial for homework, just, find the optimal profit, I think it was. And so we all went away, and the next day we all came back, and we were sort of comparing what we'd done, and all the British engineers had graphs drawn to try and find the steepest descent or whatever it was. And I just happened to glance over at the French guy who sat next to me,
So Ruth, tell us about the status of engineers in the UK.
The status of engineers in England, I think, is awful, and I wish I could change it. People, like, if you're a lawyer or you're a doctor at university, it's like, oh my god, you're a medic, oh my god, you're a lawyer. Even like a little bit of accounting, it's like, oh, I'm an accountant, but you're an engineer, they think you fix cars, they think you fix washing machines, can you come around and fix my boiler? I don't know how it works, honestly, people just don't know how hard, they know how hard it is to get an engineering degree, but still the status is very low, and the salaries are even lower.
Okay, so I came across this French concept of formation through what really was a long-standing interest in relations between knowledge and personhood. What implications does gaining this knowledge have for this person? Okay? And I started to really seriously think about this. I wasn't doing research yet to answer Donna's question earlier, but I really began to think about this when, about the relationship between my own knowledge and my own personhood when I experienced a shock. I was sitting in a graduate anthropology class on kinship theory, and I started to think about this photograph of a recent family reunion. Those of you who are trained as engineers, how did you understand what engineering was and what it meant as a person to become an engineer? Those of you who did not pursue engineering, how did you understand what engineering was and what it meant to be an engineer? You see, I was trained initially to be a straight, white, working class boy in Pittsburgh. All the men in the generation before me worked in the mills. My own father was a salesman. And all the women worked at home. On my mother's side, I have 13 cousins. There are 14 of us, 5 men, 9 women. All 5 men became engineers. All 9 women went to college, doing one of 2 things. Can you guess?
Teaching and nursing.
From the front center table comes teaching and nursing. 9! All 9! I'm sitting in kinship class. I never thought this. I thought I chose. And when I chose it to be this largely intellectual choice about math and science. I'm good at math and science. I did see its class dimensions, but not in those terms. The shock was realizing that engineering was gendered in my family male. And I just went to a class reunion, and it's gendered male across my whole class of 500 students. Okay, I met 7 engineers, all male. And the aftershocks about race and sexual orientation, they're aftershocks. They came later, but with equal magnitude. Now, I first experienced engineering worlds as tactile, material labor. I had a lot of jobs, many jobs as a laborer. One involved scraping grease off of steel mill rollers that were being reconditioned using a paint scraper. I got promoted to the steam jenny because I was so good with this paint scraper. Another was electroplating salt shaker tops on a 2-minute cycle. It took me 1 minute and 30 seconds, so I watched the clock for 23 seconds every 2 minutes. So I loved learning engineering. I loved my engineering courses. I wholly accepted that the core of my ME curriculum was mathematical problem solving. What we were doing was using the basic sciences in engineering problem solving in order to design technologies. I was preparing myself for a life in design. We're a step up. And then I had an experience at Eastman Kodak that frightened me greatly. I found myself working on a floor with 300 men at drafting boards, and it might even be this room. There were about 5 women there working as secretaries. My job was, I was working on developing film processing for the new 110 camera. I projected a whole life through this narrow lens, because there were men that had been there for 40 years, and I thought, oh no, being a designer, this is what I'm going to do. I can't sit here for 40 years. Engineering started to feel really, really narrow to me. I was jealous of those students in the liberal arts. What were they learning? And who were they? So I hung around, actually, for a fifth year to do a BA. And then, because I wanted to make languages and perspectives and understanding of public controversies over technology part of me, part of myself, this led me to take a flying leap into culture anthropology in graduate school, where I faced some very different challenges to my personhood. I mean, the image of the humanist virtuoso comes to mind. And then into the emerging field of STS, Science and Technology Studies, Science and Technology and Society, which had another set of challenges because it disappeared engineering. So after gaining tenure, I shifted my focus over to engineers and engineering. I was angry that engineering appeared in STS in one of two ways. It was either equivalent to technological knowledge, which was downstream of science and hence relatively uninteresting, or it was appropriated as a metaphor, and also then not inherently meaning in and of itself. But you know, there are far more engineers out there than scientists. I felt moved to promote research, including my own, on engineers. Now, I have to point out to you that among French historians and philosophers of education, translating formation into formation was until recently absolutely prohibited. And that was because they themselves were doing education research in terms of traditional theories of teaching and learning. And formation extended beyond that. But over the past 2 decades, a broader, more inclusive sense of the term formation has actually gained support among many, such as this philosopher, Michel Fabre, in writing, in his book, Penser la formation, thinking about formation, or say reflections on formation, where he wrote, and this is my translation, formation is characterized by a global aspect. It acts on the person as a whole. To form is more ontological than to instruct or to educate. For one's entire being is at stake. And this is what Donna was getting at with you earlier. I'm basically trying to do the same. Formation is a triple process in his terms. First, it transmits knowledge as instruction. It involves producing the entire person. And finally, it involves integrating knowledge and practice with life. To form, he concludes, thus evokes a profound effect on the person, implying a transformation of the whole being. Now, the red solicitation defines professional formation of engineers as the formal and informal, keywords here, formal and informal processes and value systems. And this is the part that I really love. Adding value systems. First time I've seen it in a NSF solicitation. Value systems by which people become engineers. It also includes the ethical responsibility of practicing engineers to sustain and grow the profession. That's a quote. Now, I have used the concept of formation, and this is how I've used to label what I think of as changing complexes of relations between knowledge and personhood. Changing complexes of relations that have the effect of producing configurations of expertise, commitments, and identities. And I think of, as an anthropologist, I think of expertise in kind of action terms as the performance of effective practices of making and doing. I think of commitments, or as, say, value orientations or normativities that materialize as directions of travel or directionalities. And when I think about identity, I parse the word identity as id, entity, and think of identities as relations among entities that are both human and non-human, and always as understood by one or more audiences. Truth, in my view, always has an audience. Now, conceptualizing engineering as complex adaptive systems, as REE currently does, leads us to map the ecology of Ruth's personal geography in interesting ways, because it brings her mom into the process, in from industry. It brings job shadowing into the process at age 14, as well as lecturers and tutors. If we start to inquire into relations between knowledge and personhood, or the triple focus on knowledge, the person, and life, as Fabre put it, we might ask, say, about Ruth's hosts. How did they describe the purposes of their work and the contents of their career trajectories? What were their larger goals? What kinds of expertise did they need to gain? How did they characterize their positioning in their worlds, both within their firms and beyond them? And to Ruth, as this 14-year-old girl, what elements of these diverse experiences caught her attention? Which did not? Did she meet any women? Was she assuming at the time that engineering was about math and science? Or did that come later? You heard her talk about it in those terms. How did she imagine work in industry through her family? And what about this choosing ME, mechanical engineering, at age 14? Was that about more than money? How did she view, her view of herself intersect with, or not, her mother's vision of her? There are many questions to ask just from this little clip. Now, engineering is not the same at all institutions or all fields. So what challenges does engineering make to the person at different types of institutions and in different fields? And the contrasts are dramatic. Now, Ruth had said at an earlier point in the interview that she didn't apply to Cambridge because they work 7 days a week. There, engineering dominates the self, and she wanted to play field hockey. At a red brick, she could get a mixture of people, she says. Was this about maintaining some kind of mixture inside of herself? Perhaps so, I think, because at UMIST, she would be living with engineers day in and day out, and once again, she would be all engineer all the time, and she said that would seem a little strange. So how are we to analyze and represent such mixtures? That, it seems to me, is what these new solicitations, this new and multi-year initiative is fundamentally about. Ruth also did not want to go to a polytechnic. She has a friend who goes to a polytechnic, and she says they don't do any work at all. So what does this say about the specific expertise that Ruth wanted for herself in relationship to other parts of herself? These knowledge and personhood. Ruth actually established a long association with AstraZeneca, including a gap year between secondary school and 2 years of coursework, and then a project year, 3 years of that's her curriculum. She had 3 years of summer employment with them, and then full-time job. She and I later exchanged some emails, but I never really interviewed her in full. Did she develop a commitment over time to pharmaceuticals and the pharmaceutical industry? Did her evolving... I'm going to ask her this now since I'm giving this lecture. Did her evolving identity at AstraZeneca fit her evolving identity as a red brick engineer? Those were happening together. What were the relations between them? Ruth actually does mention elsewhere that she experienced some disconnects that she found annoying. And we've all heard this. Students who go on co-op come back and say, well, why am I learning this? And what about her colleagues? Did they see her as becoming one of them, and in what senses? How did they judge her expertise, her commitments, her identity as she moved to greater positions of greater responsibility? This young beside the French student? What contrast in expertise, commitments, and identities lay between Ruth and that French student from one of the elite grandes écoles? To be good, that French student had to start with mathematical derivation from fundamental principles. Otherwise, he doesn't know where he is. Ruth knew by then that she doesn't need to know that. Indeed, it might make her look a little weird in her job at AstraZeneca. The French student was most likely aiming for a position in government where he knew that his work as an engineer would advance France as a whole and he would have support of the French people. Are there images of masculinity built into engineering formation, such that students who are promoted, and this is the term used when you're admitted, promoted into the grandes écoles, experience one type of challenge, and students who are being trained to work with bearings and machine tools, quite another? Finally, what about that male lecturer who asserted that women don't have spatial awareness? Probably 18 years ago, a white male professor at Virginia Tech told me that, I was kind of confused, because he told me that it was not women who had problem with spatial awareness, as his Japanese colleagues had told him and his colleagues at a recent conference in Hawaii. It's black students who have problems with spatial awareness. Are there racial, gender, heteronormities built into the person, built into the acquisition of engineering knowledge and expertise, built into its development, or imported into the person alongside expertise, or both? There are many questions to ask here. And what alternative lenses make such claims unfair or inappropriate, and yet still be engineering lenses? These are important questions, I think, for us. 2 years of coursework she did. 10 subjects. How about that? With practical training before and after. I mean, I could say a great deal about how the British integrated formal education into their apprenticeship system and apprenticeship training prior to it in the 19th century. The relationship between the two has been fraught ever since. It's fraught with conflict today and helps define the distinctive struggles of engineering formation in the UK today and the struggles for status. And I will come back to this when we talk about the professional. All right, so what's the point in asking questions about how changing complexes of relations between knowledge and personhood could produce configurations of expertise, commitments, remember, value systems, and identities? Or as Fabre puts it, in examining triple processes of transmitting knowledge, producing the entire person, and integrating knowledge and practice with life. At this moment, and in this place, or at least place next door. Which way is NSF? I don't know. That way. It is about our audiences, especially those whom we see as resisting. As Robin Tatu put it earlier this month in reviewing the Cambridge Handbook, edited by someone, I can't remember who edited it. Oh, yeah, that's right, I did to Jory. No, sorry, I mispronounced her name. Okay. And Barbara Olds. In reviewing the Cambridge Handbook, she reported that a common theme in engineering education research is resistance, or reluctance to adopt pedagogical innovation. The barrier that we call reluctance has emerged as a theme in virtually every report on the making of engineers since before the coalitions, and going back in the 80s. And one can make the case that it has provided a primary motivation for building a separate field of research in engineering education in the first place. Now, resistance is usually framed in curricular terms. This is the degree path sheet for the current mechanical engineering curriculum at Virginia Tech. It is a faculty vision. One could argue that a country, including at Virginia Tech, important innovations have taken place, especially in the first year and the last year, working in open-ended design on both ends, and with increased collaboration and a number of other innovations. And I have colleagues in this room who have done important work at Virginia Tech in the Engineer Explorations course. What the red solicitation calls a crucial target point is the engineering science courses during the middle 2 years. Now, indeed, the core in mechanical engineering is essentially the same as the mechanical engineering curriculum that I had now 40 years ago. And I can do a one-to-one correspondence.
Nice grades, by the way.
Yeah.
I love learning engineering.
Clearly.
It made me mad.
Notice the anthropology sneaking in there.
I was getting weird. I was unusual. And we still use, teaching in the course still tends to rely on what Lee Schulman, his former president of the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching, calls dorsal pedagogy. This is dorsal pedagogy. This is Neil Armstrong teaching at the University of Cincinnati in 1974. I think he turned slightly for the camera. With massive numbers of problem sets and exams that look just like them. I have one and I forgot to scan it from just a couple of weeks ago, the statics exam. Engineering education research is explicitly translational research. And this is one of the reasons why I love it. It is designed to influence communities of engineering educators. As the field has grown over the past decade, the focus has been on rigor. Oh, I just have a little problem here. As the 58 participants from the research colloquies put in 06, the goal is a rigorous, research-based approach to our educational system. Similar, and this is the key point, similar to the way in which research is performed and used in the traditional engineering disciplines, just like they do. And the centerpiece, of course, the center of attention has been a journal that has positioned itself as an archival record of rigorous research. This JAC was all about, and is all about, rigorous research. Well, somehow between my computer and this computer, I guess maybe this has already been happening, I didn't notice. I've got some translational issues. I built my PowerPoint on a Mac. My apologies. There's a problem. This image of rigorous research depends upon what we in STS call the linear or diffusion model of knowledge production. The knowledge originates with its creators. And the image of the creator, the deist image of the creator, is not inappropriate here. We revere our creators. And we also really appreciate the women who selflessly support them. The products of these creations diffuse out into the world where they are utilized. This is presumably a much more mundane process, barely worthy of notice, something that engineers do, let alone a movie. In EER, the ultimate users are engineering faculty, especially in the engineering sciences, we hope. To the extent we researchers rely on the linear model, and I include myself here because I too have published in JEE, picturing our audiences as rational actors who act on the basis of knowledge and reason alone. But what if they are not wholly rational actors? What if they are the diverse products of complex processes of formation? What if their expertise is manifest in configurations that include commitments? value system, value orientation, and identities. The product of changing complex relations between knowledge and personhood. What if in the work of engineering, of every engineer, one can find powerful passion? Okay, perhaps it's difficult to imagine passion at the core. But we all have examples. For those who embrace the engineering sciences, who integrate them into the self, who build careers and lives through them, what's at stake for them? What are they hoping to accomplish? What gets them to work each day? The concept of formation, I'm arguing here, can help us to reimagine resistance to change as forceful commitments to dominant practices, dominant continuities and expertise and identity. What modes of expertise do they develop? What sorts of identities? What sorts of commitments? And in the engineering centers, I respond to the discussion earlier, what new identities are being forged there? They're worthy of analysis. A CAD specialist once told me that he went into computational methods because he thought that design with computers would save energy. Now, at the time, he was having a bit of an identity crisis because we're using a lot of energy. A professor of thermodynamics, who I was observing, began each day with a quote, writing on the board, illustrating what can be accomplished through the lens of thermodynamics. And the one day that I was not present, out came the real motivation, the essential link between the knowledge and his personhood. The second law posits ever-increasing entropy. It asserts implicitly then that the universe had a finite beginning, and hence proves the existence of God. Those who demonstrate reluctance are not our opponents. Indeed, they too are trying to achieve change through their work, and often in interesting ways. We all have examples of commitment to dominant identities and practices that include even passion. And I maintain that we've actually given ourselves the responsibility to reach out to them, to study them, to understand them, figure out what problems they see themselves involved in, and I'll get back to that in a moment. Perhaps we are trying to reach not a homogeneous core, but a diverse array of practitioners committed to particular forms of expertise, particular identities. They just might surprise us. See that guy there? He's gay. Now, how do we get past reframing our audiences to actually reaching them? I was going to call this the $64,000 question. That's really the $640,000 question because I think of it's more of a career award. I maintain, which here really means I hope, that examining the configurations of expertise, identities, and commitments that emerge from changing relations between knowledge and personhood can better position us to identify frictions across the entire ecology in the making of engineers, even in the core. Adapting the work of others, I define frictions here as collisions within practices. Collisions that can serve as resources or points of entry for critical participation. For example, I see from reviewing the current list of awards in the REE program that a number of you have responded to the call to help create alternative pathways through engineering courses, curricula, and programs, with emphases on such folks as veterans, members of underrepresented groups, non-traditional adult students, Native Americans, and K-12 preparation. There are frictions in the degree path sheets of engineering curricula. As I said, they constitute a faculty view and plot a limited set of pathways that imagine coherence. You have to do this if you're going to be a mechanical engineer, and all mechanical engineers are alike, even though they go off and do a million different things. But
If we take the transcript view, look at the world of engineering through student transcripts. Note then student pathways become something quite different. Did it ever occur to you that no two transcripts are the same? No two ME students have followed the same pathway exactly through the ME curriculum. Might studying the actual pathways of students through ME suggest target points, points of entry, so that alternative pathways find it easier to gain acceptance and support? I don't know, but it's worth a try. What about this value systems thing, value orientations, commitments? Another collection of projects is working hard to integrate attention to ethics across the curriculum. Does the core build value commitments? Now, the core is supposed to prepare students for design projects, and here's the current list of ME design projects listed on the Virginia Tech webpage. Do students who participate in them gain value commitments, along with expertise and identities? What commitments might be included here? What is excluded or left undone? As students work on autonomous vehicles, mid-scale windmills, or intelligent robotic swimming pool cleaners. What do not attract funding? Aaron Seck, sociologist, found that as students passed through the core, they became less interested in ethical responsibilities and understanding the consequences of technology. Seck's findings appear to challenge findings that Michael Loui reported in 2006, where he wrote, "The data that I collected indicate that many engineering students, even students who have not studied ethics, are acutely aware that engineers must solve problems correctly because they are responsible for the social consequences of their technical decisions." To me, in a way, both of these claims can be right. If a commitment that students are gaining through the engineering sciences is a commitment to the whole. In other words, the conviction that engineering helps everyone all the time, it is good. If engineering helps everyone all the time, and I know that my work is going to help everyone all the time, then I can distinguish the technical from the social in my work and just concentrate on solving technical problems correctly. I don't have to express explicit interest in ethics or the specific consequences of my design work, because it's good. I've called this normative holism. Many scholars, including many of you folks in this room, have shared findings that link the epistemological contents of core courses to commitments and identities. I see increasing amount of interest in identities. Embracing the concept of formation, I'm arguing now, encourages us to focus attention on such configurations, searching for frictions that can become sites for nominating and scaling up alternative practices. Alternatives that avoid what I think of as the comforts of resolute pessimism, which is the identity of the pure critic, but one I find it's common in the humanities, for example. And accepts that the twin risks of co-optation on the one side and arrogant social engineering on the other. How does one locate and nominate alternatives that our audiences find difficult to resist, reject, or worst of all, simply ignore? I call my own project the Glasgow Project, because it was in speaking to the World Congress of Chemical Engineering in Glasgow that I took the risk. Now, very briefly, this project started with a research finding some years ago. Finding that a performative effect of problem solving, and this was mentioned earlier, a performative effect of problem solving in the core was to repeatedly classify problem solvers into two groups, the right and the wrong. Answers are right or wrong, right or wrong, right or wrong, right or wrong. Answers are right or wrong. People all tend to be right or wrong. There's a predisposition. The friction here was an absence in education that is arguably present
in professional practice. Problem solving, that where every problem begins with a word given, did not include recognizing other agents, especially non-engineers who might define problems differently or understand their work in terms other than problem solving, producing incommensurabilities that cannot necessarily be combined. Engineers call this politics, usually with an F word in front of it. Could preparing engineers by highlighting the engineering sciences be self-limiting, predisposing students to divide the world into two parts? Now, becoming a critical, using this to become a critical participant in the making of engineers involve looking for alternative practices that engineers would accept as what I think of as densely simple. The densely simple is obvious. Images that are densely simple are obvious, but once accepted into relations between knowledge and personhood, have a chance of altering the configurations of expertise, commitments, and knowledge that live there. And for me, the answer, at least to something worth pursuing, lay in the concept of problem definition. How could I persuade students that there are people out there who think about their work differently than they do, but still have knowledge and value? Aha! It's through looking at engineers. So this engineering cultures course, and as I said, an elective, shows how what counts as an engineers and what engineers have valued as their knowledge has varied dramatically over time and from place to place, such as between Britain and France. And the course includes a method for collaborative problem definition called location, knowledge, and desire. The Glasgow move was to integrate problem definition, was to begin the process, at least make a case for integrating problem definition across the core, redefining engineering as problem definition and solution. You know, there's those engineering science courses that show up in the faculty vision. They do not constitute an integrated whole. Each course constitutes a distinctive world. They do not overlap completely. But faculty do not teach how their course differs from others. Think about thermodynamics. It's taught both in ME and chemical engineering. Two different courses. One imagines heat engines. The other focuses on membranes. What's the deal here? So an argument involves, at a course level, would involve explaining how one's course differs from others. The kinds of things that are fought out in faculty meetings, but don't show up in actual courses, what it omits. At the department level, and this would be a great red project, I think, would involve introducing tracks. Take the current curriculum and call it the engineering science track, and then put alongside it an engineering design track, and alongside that an engineering and management track, and alongside that an engineering and society track. Get them all ABET accredited, and then have them compete against one another. So the faculty are used to having students just arrive, now have to attract them. So they have to bring their passions out into the courses. The passions that show up in the faculty meetings. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, my own accomplishments are modest. Have I personally ventured into the core? Not yet. I'm working my way there. But I will say the chemical engineers really like these proposals. And this audience, I formulated them by embracing the concept of formation. So let me conclude here by addressing the issue of formation as specifically professional in content. Ruth can help us here because she hopes to achieve chartership status in her professional society in the institution called Institutions of Mechanical Engineering in the UK.
Becoming a professional engineer, it's such an old traditional institution, basically. The idea of joining the Institute of Mechanical Engineers is so that you become chartered, and in becoming chartered, there could be stuff to pay you more money. And further, you have to take interviews, and you have to keep journals or logbooks or whatever. And you first of all you're a student member, and then you become an associate member, and then I think it's an incorporation most of my colleagues at university, I mean, they probably won't go for it, but if you want to be recognised and you want to be respected, I think you need chartership status.
The professional engineer is okay for NSF. But we must pay attention to the fact that the term professional is an actor's category. Since the 18th century, British engineers have tried unsuccessfully to be seen as full professionals. And in France, working ingénieurs don't really embrace the category. In fact, they kind of avoid it. In Japan and Korea right now, engineers from professional societies are attempting to work it in for local reasons. In the U.S., engineers are mostly employees. Leadership in professional societies tends to come from leadership in the workplace rather than the other way around. And most engineers do not seek licensure. And also, engineers call the A through K professional skills. And that word can be heard by our audiences through a technical social dualism. Namely, it refers to everything that's not technical. These are dangers to which we must pay attention. But, as the red solicitation points out, and was said earlier by Dr. Manat, the E in STEM Ed stands out in that it tracks learners toward degrees that make them practitioners with value orientations. Unlike the S, T, and M that are integrated in selves in a much wider range of ways. There's no better word, in my judgment, than professional to name this, to capture configurations of expertise, commitments, and identities. So, go for it. To form, thus evokes a profound effect on the person, applying a transformation of the whole being, says the philosopher of education. PFE refers to the formal and informal processes and value systems by which people become engineers. It also includes the ethical responsibility of practicing engineers to sustain and grow the profession. So says the red solicitation of 2014. The pilot solicitation is out there. What should be next? Thanks a lot for your time. Now, as I understand it, I don't know where we are in the program, but this is time for open discussion. Not just questions to me. This is discussion about the division, about the directorate, about engineering education research at NSF, supported by NSF. So, any comments I understand are appropriate. Maybe Donna, you should facilitate this discussion.
So we have microphones. It's on.